I was scraping dried paint from under my fingernails in the bathroom of a Starbucks on 5th Street when my phone exploded with notifications. The lighting was harsh, unflattering, and I looked exactly like what my family always said I was, a dreamer wasting her life on canvas and false hope. But those notifications weren't from bill collectors or rejection letters. They were screenshots, video clips, and messages that would shatter everything my family thought they knew about my so-called worthless art career. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was cleaning paint from my hands in a coffee shop bathroom while somewhere across the country, my painting Desert Dreams had just sold for $1.3 million on live television. The same painting my father called amateur garbage just 3 months ago, during what would become our final Sunday dinner together. The same piece my sister Ashley dismissed as arts and crafts projects, while cutting into her perfectly prepared roast beef. My name is Emma Rodriguez, and I'm 28 years old. I've been painting since I could hold a brush, creating art since before I understood that some families see creativity as a luxury they can't afford to respect. For the past 6 years, I've been living in a cramped studio apartment in downtown Phoenix, surrounded by canvases that most people would never understand and a dream that my own blood relatives treated like an embarrassing secret. The Sunday that changed everything started like all the others. Linda Rodriguez, my mother, had spent the morning preparing her signature meal with military precision. Every dish perfectly timed, every place setting measured to the millimeter. She took pride in these dinners, not because they brought the family together, but because they gave her a stage to perform the role of the perfect matriarch. I arrived at the Scottsdale house at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying a small canvas I'd finished the night before. It was a gift for my parents, a desert landscape with subtle urban elements woven throughout, capturing the way Phoenix looked during sunset from my apartment window. I'd spent weeks on it, layering colors and textures until the piece practically glowed with warmth. The house smelled like rosemary and disappointment, a combination I'd grown accustomed to over the years. My father, Robert, was already positioned, in his leather recliner, remote in hand, ready to split his attention between whatever game was on and whatever lecture he'd prepared for me this week about getting serious about life. Ashley had claimed her usual spot at the dining table, laptop open, working even on family day because that's what successful people do. Or at least that's the message she liked to broadcast. Tyler walked in just behind me, still wearing his hospital scrubs, looking exhausted, but somehow managing to radiate the golden glow that had followed him since childhood. He was completing his residency at Phoenix General, and every conversation somehow circled back to his achievements, his future, his importance. Mason, my younger brother, gave me a genuine smile from the kitchen where he was helping Mom with the final preparations. At 24, he was still figuring out his path, but unlike me, his uncertainty was treated with patience and encouragement, rather than lectures about responsibility and practical choices. "Emma's here with another painting," Ashley announced, without looking up from her laptop, her tone carrying just enough disdain to poison the air before I'd even had a chance to speak. "I brought this for you and Dad," I said, unwrapping the canvas carefully. The afternoon light streaming through the dining room windows hit the piece perfectly, bringing out the gold and orange hues I'd worked so hard to capture. My mother glanced at it while adjusting the salt and pepper shakers for the 3rd time. "Oh, that's nice, honey. Very colorful." Her voice carried the same tone she used when Mason was 7 and brought her finger paintings from school. Polite dismissal wrapped in maternal obligation. Robert barely lifted his eyes from the television. "Where are you going to put another one, Linda? We're running out of wall space for Emma's hobby projects." Hobby projects. The words hit like they always did, a small knife twist that I'd learned to absorb without flinching. 6 years of dedication, countless hours perfecting my technique, Gallery showings that had slowly built my reputation in the local art scene, all reduced to hobby projects. Actually, I've been getting some real interest in my work lately, I said, setting the painting against the wall where it caught the light beautifully. There's a gallery in Los Angeles that's been following my pieces. They think I might be ready for a bigger platform. Ashley finally looked up from her laptop, one eyebrow raised in what I'd learned to recognize as her signature expression of superiority. Los Angeles? Emma, you can barely afford rent on that shoebox apartment. How are you planning to break into the LA art scene? The same way anyone breaks into any competitive field, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Talent, persistence, and the right opportunity. Tyler laughed, not maliciously, but with the casual dismissiveness that somehow hurt more than outright cruelty. I'm not trying to be harsh, but you've been saying stuff like this for years. Remember when you were convinced that gallery in Tempe was going to make you famous? Or when you thought that coffee shop exhibition was your big break? The coffee shop exhibition. 3 months of my best work displayed at a local cafe, where I'd sold exactly 2 pieces to people who probably bought them because they felt sorry for me. Tyler wasn't wrong about the trajectory of my career so far, but he was missing the point entirely. Every small step, every minor sale, every person who stopped to really look at my work was building towards something larger. This is different, I said, though I could hear the defensiveness creeping into my voice. My style is developing. I'm getting noticed by people who understand art as an investment, not just decoration. Investment? Robert's voice carried from the living room, tinged with the amusement of someone who'd heard this song before. Emma, art isn't an investment unless you're Picasso or that Van Gogh fellow. And last I checked, they were both dead. Linda called us to the table, and we arranged ourselves in our familiar positions. Ashley to Mom's right, Tyler to Dad's right. Mason and me relegated to the far end where our conversations couldn't interfere with the important discussions about Ashley's latest case or Tyler's rotation in cardiology. The meal began with the usual update ritual. Ashley spoke about a merger she was handling, dropping terms like due diligence and fiduciary responsibility, while our parents nodded with the reverence typically reserved for religious ceremonies. Tyler discussed a complicated surgery he'd observed, detailing the procedure with enough medical terminology to remind everyone of his intellectual superiority. When the conversation inevitably turned to me, the energy shifted. Not hostile exactly, but patronizing in a way that made my skin crawl. So, Emma, Linda said, cutting her roast beef into precise, identical pieces, are you still doing that painting thing? That painting thing. As if 6 years of dedicated work, gallery showings, and slowly building recognition could be reduced to a hobby I'd picked up last week. I'm still an artist, yes, I replied, accepting the glass of wine Mason poured for me. Actually, I just finished a new series that I'm really excited about. It's a collection exploring the intersection of natural landscapes and urban development. That sounds very abstract, Ashley said, her lawyer voice in full effect. Is there a market for that kind of work? I mean, who actually buys art that doesn't depict something recognizable? The question revealed everything about how my family viewed creativity. Art, in their minds, was supposed to be pretty pictures that matched furniture and didn't challenge anyone to think beyond surface appearances. The idea that someone might purchase a piece because it made them feel something, or because it represented a unique perspective on the world we share, was completely foreign to them. There's actually a growing market for contemporary mixed media work, I explained, trying to maintain patience. Collectors are looking for pieces that tell stories, that make statements about our current cultural moment. Tyler set down his fork and looked at me with what I'd learned to recognize as his serious face, the one he used when delivering difficult news to patients' families. Emma, I'm worried about you. You're 28. You're living paycheck to paycheck, and you're banking your future on something that statistically almost never works out. Maybe it's time to consider art as something you do on the side while building a more stable career. The suggestion hung in the air like smoke from a fire everyone could smell, but pretended not to notice. A stable career, code for abandoning everything that made me who I was in favor of something that would make family dinners more comfortable for everyone else. What would you suggest? I asked, genuinely curious about what alternative life they'd constructed for me in their minds. You could go back to school, Linda offered. Get a teaching certificate. Art teachers have good benefits, and you'd still be involved with art. Or use that art background in marketing, Robert added, warming to the topic. Companies always need people who understand visual design. That's a practical application of your skills. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ashley nodded approvingly. Corporate communications departments are always looking for people with creative backgrounds. You could make decent money and still use your artistic training. They had it all figured out. A neat little box where Emma the artist could be transformed into Emma the art teacher or Emma the corporate communications specialist. Someone who used creativity in service of other people's visions instead of developing her own. I appreciate the suggestions, I said carefully, but I'm committed to my path as an artist. It's not a hobby for me. It's not something I do on the side. It's who I am. The silence that followed was deafening. Not the comfortable quiet of a family enjoying a meal together, but the heavy stillness that settles over a room when someone has said something that makes everyone else profoundly uncomfortable. Mason cleared his throat. I think Emma's paintings are incredible. That piece she brought today is beautiful. You can see how much thought and skill went into every detail. I wanted to hug him for the support, but I could feel the adults in the room exchanging looks that said everything about how seriously they took his opinion. Of course her paintings are nice, Linda said with the forced brightness of someone trying to smooth over an awkward moment. Emma has always been creative, but nice paintings and a sustainable career are two very different things. Sustainable career. The phrase that had haunted me through every family gathering, every phone call, every interaction where I tried to share my excitement about a new piece or a positive response from a gallery owner. My family couldn't conceive of art as anything more than an expensive hobby, and they certainly couldn't imagine that their daughter might possess the talent and determination necessary to succeed in a competitive field. You know what's not sustainable, I said, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. Spending your entire life doing work that doesn't fulfill you just because other people think it's practical. You know what's not sustainable? Building a life around other people's expectations instead of your own dreams. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Ashley closed her laptop. Tyler stopped chewing, and my parents exchanged the look that had preceded every serious conversation about my future since I'd graduated college. Emma, Robert said, his voice carrying the weight of paternal authority. Dreams don't pay rent. Dreams don't provide health insurance. Dreams don't build retirement funds or create stability for the family you might want to have someday. Maybe not, I replied, but neither does a job that makes you miserable. And maybe, just maybe, some dreams are worth the risk. Ashley leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, wearing the expression she probably used in court when opposing counsel made a particularly weak argument. Emma, you're being naive. The art world isn't some romantic place where talent automatically gets recognized and rewarded. It's a business, and like any business, it rewards people who understand market realities. You think I don't understand market realities? I asked, feeling heat rise in my chest. I've been navigating market realities for 6 years. I know exactly how difficult this path is. But I also know that I'm good at what I do, and I'm getting better every day. Being good isn't enough. Tyler said, his doctor voice in full effect. Being great isn't enough. You need connections, you need capital, you need luck. And even then, most people don't make it. Most people don't make it in medicine either, I shot back. Most people don't make it in law. Most people don't make it in any competitive field. But that doesn't stop people from trying when it's something the family considers respectable. The comparison landed like a slap. Ashley's face flushed red, and Tyler's jaw tightened. They'd both worked incredibly hard to get where they were, and they clearly didn't appreciate having their achievements compared to my artistic pursuits. That's completely different, Ashley said, her lawyer instincts kicking into overdrive. Medicine and law provide essential services to society. They require specific, measurable skills and extensive education. They're regulated professions with clear standards for competency. And art doesn't require skill? I asked. Art doesn't provide value to society? Art doesn't require education and practice and constant improvement? It's not the same thing, Linda interjected, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Ashley and Tyler help people. They solve problems. They contribute to society in concrete ways. The implication was clear. What I did was selfish, frivolous, unnecessary. Art was decoration, not contribution. Artists were indulgent dreamers, not valuable members of society. Art helps people too, I said quietly. Art makes people feel less alone. Art helps people see the world differently. Art preserves culture and challenges assumptions and inspires change. Maybe it doesn't save lives or win court cases, but it does matter. Robert set down his wine glass with more force than necessary. Emma, no one is saying art doesn't matter. We're saying that pursuing art as a career is impractical for someone without a trust fund or a spouse with a stable income. We're worried about you. We want you to be secure. You want me to be safe, I corrected. There's a difference between security and safety. You want me to choose the path that won't make you worry, not necessarily the path that will make me happy. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Mason was staring at his plate. Tyler was checking his phone, and Ashley was preparing what I could tell would be a devastating response. Happiness is a luxury, Ashley said finally. Happiness is what you get to pursue after you've built a foundation for yourself. You can't eat happiness. You can't pay medical bills with happiness. You can't retire on happiness. So, I should spend the next 40 years of my life being miserable so I can be comfortable when I'm old? I asked. That's your advice? Sacrifice my 20s and 30s and 40s doing work I hate so I can have enough money to enjoy my 60s. I'm not miserable, Tyler said defensively. I love medicine. It's challenging and rewarding, and I'm making a real difference. I'm not talking about you, I replied. You found something you love that also happens to be financially stable. Good for you, but that doesn't mean everyone has to follow the same formula. Linda stood up and began clearing plates, her movements sharp and efficient. The signal that this conversation had gone on long enough and needed to be redirected towards safer territory. Why don't we talk about something else? She suggested, though it sounded more like a command than a question. Tyler, tell us about that conference you're attending next month. But I wasn't ready to let it go. 6 years of subtle dismissals, patronizing advice, and thinly veiled disapproval had built up inside me like pressure in a volcano, and Ashley's comment about happiness, being a luxury, had finally triggered the eruption. You know what I think? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I think you're all scared that I might actually make it. I think you're terrified that your practical, safe choices might not be the only way to build a successful life. The words escaped before I could stop them. And once they were out there, hanging in the artificially fragrant air of my mother's dining room, there was no taking them back. Ashley's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You heard me? I said, surprising myself with my boldness. If I succeed as an artist, It challenges everything you believe about how life is supposed to work. It suggests that maybe taking risks and following passion can lead to something meaningful and financially viable. And that possibility threatens the narrative you've built about your own choices. Tyler laughed, but there was no humor in it. Emma, that's ridiculous. We want you to succeed. We just don't want you to waste your life chasing something that probably won't happen. Probably won't happen according to who? I asked. According to people who have never tried? According to people who chose safety over possibility before they ever tested their limits? Robert turned off the television and gave me his full attention for the first time all afternoon. Emma Rodriguez, you are out of line. Your mother. And I have worked hard to provide opportunities for all of you children. Ashley and Tyler took advantage of those opportunities and built successful careers. You're choosing to ignore practical advice and pursue something that has a 99% failure rate. Where did you get that statistic? I asked. 99% failure rate according to what study? Based on what definition of success? Or is that just something you tell yourself to justify discouraging me? The question clearly caught him off guard. Robert was used to making authoritative statements that went unchallenged, particularly about topics he considered within his area of expertise, which apparently included career counseling for artistic pursuits he'd never attempted. I don't need a study to know that most artists don't make a living from their art, he said finally. That's common knowledge. Most lawyers don't make partner, I replied. Most doctors don't become department heads. Most accountants don't build their own firms. Does that mean people shouldn't try? Ashley slammed her hand on the table, rattling the wine glasses and causing everyone to jump. Stop comparing what Tyler and I do to your painting hobby. It's not the same thing, and you know it. You're right, I said, standing up from my chair. It's not the same thing. What you do is considered respectable by people who don't understand it. What I do is dismissed by people who don't understand it. The difference is in the audience, not the difficulty or the value. Linda returned from the kitchen, clearly sensing the tension that had escalated in her absence. What's going on here? Why is everyone shouting? Emma's having another one of her artistic tantrums, Ashley said, her voice dripping with disdain. She's upset because we suggested she consider a more practical career path. Artistic tantrum. The phrase cut deeper than Ashley probably intended, reducing my frustration and hurt to the stereotype of the temperamental artist who couldn't handle criticism or reality. I'm not having a tantrum, I said quietly. I'm tired of being treated like a child whose dreams are cute but ultimately irrelevant. I'm tired of being the family member whose career doesn't count because it doesn't fit into your narrow definition of success. Mason finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe we should all just calm down and finish dinner. But I was already reaching for my purse, already mentally preparing for the drive back to my apartment, already accepting that this Sunday dinner would end like so many others had, with me feeling frustrated and misunderstood while my family shook their heads about my unrealistic expectations. Emma, sit down, Linda said firmly. We're having a family dinner. We can discuss this calmly without anyone storming off. Can we? I asked. Can we actually discuss it? Or will it be another session where everyone takes turns explaining why my life choices are wrong while I sit quietly and pretend to be grateful for the advice? The silence that followed was answer enough. This wasn't a discussion. It never had been. It was an intervention disguised as concern, a coordinated effort to pressure me into abandoning the path I'd chosen in favor of something that would make everyone else more comfortable. I brought you a painting today, I said, looking at the canvas still leaning against the wall where it continued to catch the afternoon light beautifully. I spent weeks on it. I wanted to share something I created with people I love. But instead of seeing the time and skill and thought I put into it, you see another example of my impractical hobby. We appreciate the gesture, Robert said carefully, but that doesn't change the fact that you need to think about your future more seriously. I think about my future every day, I replied. I think about the kind of artist I want to become. I think about the stories I want to tell through my work. I think about the people who might connect with something I create. I think about building a body of work that represents who I am and what I believe. That is thinking about my future. Tyler shook his head. Emma, that's not a business plan. That's not a retirement strategy. That's not a way to support yourself long term. Maybe not, I admitted. But it's a way to build a life that feels authentic and meaningful. And maybe that's worth more than a guaranteed paycheck. Ashley gathered her laptop and papers with the efficiency of someone who had reached the end of their patience. When you're 40 and broke and realize you've wasted 20 years on a fantasy, don't come crying to us about how unfair life is. The cruelty of the comment took my breath away. Not because it was unexpected. Ashley had always been capable of cutting remarks when she felt cornered, but because it revealed how little faith she had in me. How completely she dismissed not just my career choice, but my ability to make intelligent decisions about my own life. Don't worry, I said, picking up my purse and heading toward the door. When I'm 40 and successful, I won't come crying to you about how right I was either. I left the painting propped against the dining room wall, a small piece of beauty, and hope abandoned in a house that had no room for either. As I drove back to my apartment through the Phoenix afternoon, I replayed the conversation over and over, searching for the moment when discussion had turned into attack, when concern had become condescension. The truth was, there hadn't been a single moment. This dynamic had been building for years, conversation by conversation, Sunday dinner by Sunday dinner. My family had never taken my art seriously because they'd never taken me seriously. To them, I would always be the impractical dreamer who needed guidance from the responsible adults who had figured out how life really worked. But as I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex, surrounded by the urban landscape I'd tried to capture in the painting I'd left behind, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done trying to convince them. I was done seeking their approval. I was done allowing their fear to diminish my hope. 3 months later, when my phone exploded with notifications about $1 million sale, I realized that some victories are sweeter when they're unexpected. And some families need to see you succeed before they can see you at all. The weeks following that disastrous Sunday dinner felt like living in a different universe. I threw myself into my work with an intensity that bordered on obsession, spending 14-hour days in my studio apartment with paint-stained fingers and eyes that burned from focusing too long on canvas details. The hurt from my family's dismissal had crystallized into something harder and more useful. Pure determination. My apartment became a fortress of creativity. Canvases lined every wall, some finished, others in various stages of completion. The smell of acrylic paint and turpentine had permanently embedded itself in the furniture, and I'd long since stopped caring about the colorful handprints on my refrigerator door. This was my world, the place where Emma, the impractical dreamer, transformed into Emma, the serious artist. I'd been working on a new piece when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with a Los Angeles area code. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Emma Rodriguez? The voice was crisp, professional, with the kind of confidence that suggested important things happened when this person spoke. Yes, this is Emma. My name is Victoria Chen, and I'm a curator at the Whitmore Gallery in Los Angeles. I've been following your work for several months now, particularly the urban landscape series you've been developing. I nearly dropped my brush. The Whitmore Gallery wasn't just any gallery. It was the kind of place where emerging artists went to become established artists, where collectors came to discover the next big names before they became household words. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I asked, certain I'd misheard something crucial. Victoria laughed, a warm sound that immediately put me at ease. I know this is unexpected. I've been tracking artists working in mixed media. specifically those exploring the intersection of natural and urban environments. Your technique is remarkable, and your perspective is exactly what we're looking for in our upcoming exhibition. My heart was beating so hard I was sure she could hear it through the phone. What kind of exhibition? It's called Desert Visions, Contemporary Voices from the Southwest. We're featuring 12 artists whose work captures the modern Western experience. The exhibition will run for 3 months, with significant media coverage and collector previews. More importantly, we have partnerships with several auction houses, including Meridian Fine Arts, which specializes in contemporary works. Meridian Fine Arts. I'd heard of them, of course. They handled pieces that sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions. Artists whose work went through Meridian didn't worry about rent or grocery money anymore. I'd like to include 3 of your pieces, Victoria continued. Specifically, I'm interested in Desert Dreams, Urban Mirage, and Phoenix Rising. And I saw photos of them at the Morrison Gallery showing last month. The Morrison Gallery showing? A small exhibition that I'd thought was insignificant, attended by maybe 30 people on a Thursday evening. I'd sold 1 piece to a local collector and considered it a minor victory. Apparently, the right person had been in that small crowd. That sounds incredible, I managed to say. What would be the timeline? The exhibition opens in 6 weeks. I know it's short notice, but we had a last-minute addition to the roster after another artist had to withdraw. If you're interested, I'd need the pieces delivered to Los Angeles within 2 weeks for catalog photography and authentication. 6 weeks. 2 weeks to prepare. This was the opportunity I'd been working toward for years, the chance to showcase my work on a platform that could change everything. It was also happening at exactly the wrong time financially. I had enough. Money to cover rent and groceries for another month, maybe 6 weeks if I ate nothing but ramen and skipped the electric bill. There would be an artist fee, of course, Victoria added, as if reading my mind. $5,000 plus 50% of any sales during the exhibition period. $5,000, more money than I'd made from my art in the past. 6 months combined, enough to cover my expenses during the exhibition and maybe even afterward, depending on how well the pieces sold. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how quickly the word came out. Yes, I'm absolutely interested. Excellent. I'll email you the contract and details this afternoon. Emma, I want you to know that this isn't charity or a favor to a struggling artist. Your work deserves this platform. You're exactly the kind of emerging talent we're excited to support. After we hung up, I sat in my studio staring at the 3 paintings she'd mentioned. Desert Dreams was propped against the easel, the piece I'd brought to Sunday dinner and left behind in my parents' dining room. Urban Mirage hung on the wall next to my bed, a complex piece that had taken me 4 months to complete. Phoenix Rising was my newest work, still technically in progress but nearly finished. I would need Desert Dreams back from my parents. The thought of calling them, of having to ask for the painting after that horrible dinner, made my stomach twist. But Victoria Chen wanted that specific piece, and I wasn't about to let family drama cost me the opportunity of a lifetime. I picked up my phone and dialed my mother's number before I could lose my nerve. Emma, is everything okay? Linda's voice carried that particular tone of maternal concern that suggested catastrophe was the only reason I'd be calling on a Wednesday afternoon. Hi, Mom. Yes, everything's fine. Actually, everything's really good. I have some news about my art. There was a pause, and I could almost hear her mental adjustment from emergency mode to patience mode. Oh? What kind of news? A gallery in Los Angeles wants to include 3 of my paintings in a major exhibition. It's a really big deal, Mom. The kind of opportunity that could change my entire career. That's wonderful, honey, she said. And I could tell she was trying to inject enthusiasm into her voice. Which paintings? Well, that's why I'm calling. One of the pieces they want is the painting I brought to Sunday dinner last week. Desert Dreams. I know I left it there, and I was hoping I could come pick it up. Another pause, longer this time. "Oh, Emma, I'm so sorry. We gave that painting to Aunt Patty. She admired it so much when she stopped by yesterday, and since you'd left it here, we thought you didn't want it." The words hit me like a physical blow. They'd given away my work, a piece I'd spent weeks creating, a painting that was now critical to my career breakthrough, had been casually handed off to a relative because they assumed I didn't want it. "You gave it away?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Well, yes. Patty said it would look beautiful in her living room, and you know how much she loves art. We thought you'd be happy that someone appreciated it so much." Someone appreciated it, as if I should be grateful that my aunt wanted to use my painting as living room decoration, as if being appreciated as home decor was the highest honor my work could achieve. "Mom, that painting isn't just decoration. It's part of my professional portfolio. I need it back." "I'm sure Patty would understand if we explain the situation," Linda said carefully. "But Emma, are you sure this gallery thing is legitimate? There are a lot of scams targeting artists these days." Even now, even when I was calling with news of a genuine opportunity, her first instinct was skepticism. Not excitement for my success, not pride in my achievement, but concern that I was being fooled by people who would take advantage of my naive artistic ambitions. "It's legitimate, Mom. The Whitmore Gallery is very well known. This is exactly the kind of opportunity I've been working toward." "Of course, dear. I'll call Patty and explain the situation. I'm sure she'll understand." But I could hear the reluctance in her voice, the unwillingness to create family drama over what she still saw as one of my hobby projects. In her mind, asking Patty to return the painting would be making a big fuss over something insignificant, and Linda Rodriguez had built her entire identity around being the family member who kept things pleasant and avoided unnecessary conflict. "Actually, let me call Aunt Patty directly," I said. "I can explain the situation better, and I don't want to put you in an awkward position." "Are you sure? You know how sensitive she can be about these things." Sensitive. As if expecting the return of my own artwork was somehow unreasonable, as if asking for my painting back would be an imposition rather than a completely normal request. I called Aunt Patty immediately after hanging up with my mother. The conversation was even more frustrating than I'd anticipated. "Oh, Emma, honey, I just love this painting so much," she gushed. "I hung it in my living room yesterday, and David says it really brings the whole room together. It's exactly what that wall needed. Aunt Patty, I'm so glad you like it, but I actually need the painting back. I have an exhibition opportunity, and that specific piece is required." "An exhibition? How exciting! But surely you have other paintings they could use instead. This one looks so perfect where it is, and I was thinking of having a little dinner party this weekend specifically to show it off." She wanted to throw a dinner party to show off my painting. To her friends, it was a conversation piece, something interesting she'd acquired that would make people ask questions and give her an opportunity to mention her artistic niece. The idea that it was a crucial component of my professional career simply didn't register. "I understand it looks great in your living room," I said, trying to keep my voice patient. "But this isn't just any painting. It's part of a series that took me months to complete, and the curator specifically requested this piece." "Well, couldn't you just paint another one? I mean, you painted this one, so you could paint another one just like it, right?" The question revealed everything about how my family viewed artistic creation. To Aunt Patty, paintings were like photocopies, identical products that could be reproduced on demand. The idea that each piece was unique, that months of work and creative development couldn't simply be replicated in a few days, was completely foreign to her. "Aunt Patty, it doesn't work that way. Each painting is original. I can't just create an identical copy, especially not in the time frame I'm working with." "Oh." She sounded genuinely confused, as if I'd just explained quantum physics instead of basic facts about how art worked. "Well, when is this exhibition thing?" 6 weeks. And I need to deliver the painting to Los Angeles in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? That's so soon. I was really hoping to keep it for a while. Maybe we could work something out. I could loan it to you for the exhibition and then you could give it back afterward. Give it back, as if the painting belonged to her. Now, as if accepting a gift meant permanent ownership regardless of the circumstances. Aunt Patty, with all due respect, that's my painting. I created it, and I need it for my career. I appreciate that you like it, but it was never meant to be a permanent gift. The conversation deteriorated from there. Aunt Patty became defensive, suggesting that I was being unreasonable and ungrateful. She'd already rearranged her furniture. To accommodate the piece, she'd told her friends about it. She'd planned that dinner party. Asking for it back was causing her inconvenience and embarrassment. By the time I finally convinced her to return the painting, our relationship had sustained damage that would probably take years to repair. She agreed to let me pick it up the next day, but her tone made it clear that she considered me selfish and difficult. That evening, I called my mother to let her know I'd resolved the situation with Aunt Patty. "Oh, good," Linda said, but I could hear the tension in her voice. Although Patty did call me afterward, she's quite upset about the whole thing. "I'm sorry she's upset," I replied, "but this exhibition is really important for my career." "I know, honey, but family relationships are important too. Patty feels like you were rude to her, and she's questioning whether she should have been so supportive of your art in the first place." Supportive. Patty had never bought a painting, never attended an exhibition, never expressed interest in my work until she decided she wanted to decorate her living room with it. But somehow, accepting a painting she thought was unwanted made her supportive, and asking for it back made me ungrateful. "Mom, I wasn't rude to Aunt Patty. I explained the situation and asked for my painting back. That's completely reasonable." "Of course it is, dear. But you know how these things can escalate. Maybe you could paint something special for her as an apology? Something she could keep permanently?" An apology. For wanting my own artwork back. For prioritizing my career over my aunt's living room decor. The suggestion was so absurd that I almost laughed, except it wasn't funny. It was the same pattern that had played out at Sunday dinner. The same expectation that I should prioritize other people's comfort over my own legitimate needs. "I'll think about it," I said, knowing I wouldn't. The next day, I drove to Aunt Patty's house to retrieve Desert Dreams. She answered the door with the wounded expression of someone who'd been deeply wronged, and our interaction was so chilly that I half expected frost to form on the windows. "I hope this exhibition thing works out for you," she said as she reluctantly handed over the painting. "It would be a shame if I gave up my beautiful living room decoration for nothing." I wanted to explain that even if the exhibition didn't lead to immediate success, the experience and exposure would be valuable for my long-term career development. I wanted to help her understand that art wasn't just decoration, that artists weren't just interior designers who worked for free. But I could see in her eyes that she'd already made up her mind about the situation, and anything I said would only confirm her belief that I was ungrateful and difficult. Back in my studio with all 3 paintings finally assembled, I spent the next week preparing for the shipment to Los Angeles. Each piece needed to be carefully wrapped, documented, and insured. I researched the Whitmore Gallery online, reading about previous exhibitions and the artists they'd featured. Many of them had gone on to significant careers, with pieces selling at major auction houses and museums acquiring their work for permanent collections. The contract Victoria had sent was more generous than I'd expected. Beyond the exhibition, fee and sales commission, there were provisions for catalog inclusion, media interviews, and potential future representation. This wasn't just a one-time showing. It was the beginning of a professional relationship that could sustain my career for years. I called Mason to share the news, needing to tell someone who might actually be excited for me. "Emma, that's incredible," he said, and I could hear genuine enthusiasm in his voice. "The Whitmore Gallery? I looked them up after you mentioned it. They represent some seriously successful artists. I know. I can hardly believe it's happening. Have you told Mom and Dad yet? They're going to be so proud. I hesitated. I told Mom about it when I needed to get the painting back from Aunt Patty. She seemed cautiously supportive. Cautiously supportive? Mason laughed. That's Mom speak for, I don't understand this, but I'm trying to be encouraging. What about Dad? I haven't talked to him yet. After last Sunday's dinner, I'm not sure he'd consider this real news. Emma, this is huge news. When Dad hears that you're showing at a major gallery in Los Angeles, he'll have to take your art seriously. I wanted to share Mason's optimism, but I'd learned not to overestimate my family's capacity for excitement about my achievements. They'd been trained to view my artistic pursuits as expensive hobbies, and one exhibition, even a prestigious one, might not be enough to overcome. Years of skepticism. Maybe, I said. We'll see. That weekend, I delivered the paintings to a professional shipping company that specialized in artwork transport. Watching them carefully crate each piece felt like sending my children off to college. Exciting and terrifying in equal measure. The woman handling the shipment, Maria, was an artist herself who understood the emotional weight of the moment. First major gallery exhibition? She asked as she secured the final piece. How could you tell? The look on your face. I shipped my first pieces to New York 15 years ago with that exact same expression, terror and hope in equal proportions. Did it work out for you? Maria smiled. I'm still here, still painting, still shipping artwork all over the country. Some exhibitions change everything, some teach you important lessons, and some are just steps on a very long ladder. But they're all worth taking. After the paintings were shipped, I had 6 weeks to wait. 6 weeks to wonder if this opportunity would transform my career, or if it would be another small step in a journey that might never reach the destination I was hoping for. I decided to use the time productively, working on new pieces and researching the collectors and critics who might attend the exhibition opening. I also started a blog documenting the experience, partly to process my own emotions and partly to create a record of what it felt like to be an emerging artist on the verge of possibly breaking through. The blog posts attracted a small but engaged readership, mostly other artists and art students who were following similar paths. Their comments and encouragement became a lifeline during the weeks of waiting, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this strange combination of vulnerability and ambition that defined the artistic life. 3 weeks before the exhibition opening, Victoria called with an update that made my heart race. Emma, I have some exciting news. Meridian Fine Arts is very interested in your work. They'd like to include Desert Dreams in their contemporary art auction next month. Their auction? But the painting will be in your exhibition. The exhibition closes 2 weeks before the auction date. It's perfect timing, actually. The exposure from our show will generate interest among collectors, and the auction will provide a platform for serious bidding. I tried to process what she was telling me. Meridian Fine Arts auctions were major events, attended by collectors who spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on single pieces. Having my work included would mean exposure to an entirely different level of the art market. What kind of estimate are they suggesting? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. They're thinking $50,000 to $75,000 for the opening bid, with potential to go much higher depending on interest. $50,000 to $75,000 for a painting I'd created in my studio apartment, using materials I'd bought, with credit cards because I couldn't afford to pay cash. The amount was so far beyond anything I'd imagined that it didn't feel real. Emma, are you still there? Yes, sorry, that's more money than I make in 2 years. It's what your work is worth, Victoria said firmly. The art market is finally recognizing the value of contemporary mixed media pieces, especially from artists with your technical skill and unique perspective. After we hung up, I sat in my studio staring at the space where Desert Dreams had been propped for months. That painting, which my family had casually given away as living room decoration, was about to be auctioned at one of the most prestigious auction houses in the country. I thought about calling my parents to share the news, but something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of that Sunday dinner, or the stress of retrieving the painting from Aunt Patty, or the years of gentle discouragement disguised as practical advice. Part of me wanted to wait until after the auction, until I had concrete results to share rather than just possibilities. But part of me, the part that still craved their approval and support, wanted them to know that their practical, reliable daughter was about to step onto a stage they'd never imagined she could reach. I wanted them to understand that the dreams they'd dismissed as naive fantasies were turning into reality. In the end, I decided to wait. Let the auction happen. Let the results speak for themselves. Then, maybe, we could have a different kind of conversation about my impractical art career and the future I was building one painting at a time. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was mixing paint colors for a new piece, my hands all ready, stained with cerulean blue and burnt sienna. I almost didn't answer because I was in that creative zone where interruptions felt like violations, but something about the persistence of the ringing made me pick up. "Emma, it's Victoria. I have news that's going to change your life." The tone in her voice was different from our previous conversations. Not the professional enthusiasm of a curator discussing an upcoming exhibition, but something rawer, more urgent. I set down my brush and gave her my full attention. "The exhibition opening was incredible," she continued. "We had over 300 people attend, including some of the most serious collectors on the West Coast. But Emma, what happened after the opening was unprecedented." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean?" "Your pieces generated immediate interest. By the end of the evening, we had 5 collectors making serious inquiries about Urban, Mirage, and Phoenix Rising. But Desert Dreams created something I've never seen in 15 years of curating exhibitions." I found myself holding my breath, afraid that speaking would somehow break whatever spell was being cast. 3 different collectors wanted to purchase it immediately, and they started bidding against each other right there in the gallery. We had to stop the impromptu auction and explain that the piece was already committed to Meridian for their contemporary sale. The words washed over me like warm water. 3 collectors, bidding against each other. For a painting I'd created, in my cramped studio apartment while eating cereal for dinner because I couldn't afford anything else. "But here's where it gets interesting," Victoria continued. "The bidding war created so much buzz that Meridian moved your piece from their afternoon session to the evening primetime slot. They've also revised their estimate." "Revised it how?" "The new estimate is $200,000 to $300,000. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto my paint-stained table. $200,000 to $300,000. The amount was so staggering that my brain couldn't process it. 6 months ago, I'd been stressed about making rent. Now, a single painting might sell for enough money to buy a house. I picked up the phone to find Victoria still talking. "Emma, are you there? I know it's a lot to absorb." "I'm here," I managed. I can't believe this is happening." "Believe it. Your work has struck a chord with collectors who understand the contemporary market. The technical skill combined with your unique perspective on urban natural landscapes is exactly what serious buyers are looking for right now." After we hung up, I sat in my studio staring at the paintings that remained. If Desert Dreams was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, what did that say about the rest of my work? What did it say about the years I'd spent doubting myself? The family dinners where my career was dismissed as unrealistic fantasy? I called Mason immediately, needing to share the news with someone who would understand the magnitude of what was happening. "Emma, slow down," he said, laughing at my barely coherent excitement. "Did you just say $300,000? That's the high estimate. It could sell for less, but even the low estimate is more money than I've ever imagined making from my art." "Holy shit, Emma! Do you realize what this means? I did realize, but hearing him say it made it feel more real. This wasn't just about money, though the financial security would transform my life. It was about validation on a scale I'd never dared to hope for. It was proof that the path I'd chosen, despite years of family skepticism and personal doubt, was leading somewhere extraordinary. "Have you told Mom and Dad yet?" Mason asked, the question I'd been avoiding. Part of me wanted to wait until after the auction, until I had concrete results rather than projections. But another part of me, the part that still craved their approval, despite everything, wanted them to know that their impractical daughter was about to achieve something remarkable. Not yet. I'm not sure how to even begin that conversation. "Emma, this changes everything. Even Dad will have to admit that you were right about your art career." I wanted to share Mason's confidence, but I'd learned not to overestimate my family's capacity for admitting they'd been wrong. Years of entrenched skepticism weren't easily overcome, even by objective success. "We'll see," I said. That evening, I finally worked up the courage to call my parents. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice carrying that familiar tone of maternal concern that suggested she was expecting bad news. "Emma, is everything okay?" "Hi, Mom. Yes, everything's great. Actually, everything's incredible. I have some news about the exhibition." "Oh, how did that go? I've been meaning to ask." Her tone was polite but distant, the way she might inquire about a hobby club meeting or a community college class. I took a deep breath and prepared to shatter her expectations. The exhibition was a huge success. My paintings generated a lot of interest from collectors. "That's wonderful, honey. I'm so glad people appreciated your work." Appreciated, as if casual admiration was the highest goal I could reasonably aspire to. "Mom, it's more than appreciation. One of my paintings is being auctioned at Meridian Fine Arts next week. The estimate is $200,000 to $300,000. The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if the call had dropped. I could hear the television in the background, some game show with enthusiastic audience applause, but no sound from my mother. "Mom? Are you there?" "I'm here." Her voice was small, confused. "Did you say $300,000? "Yes, for one painting. The piece I brought to Sunday dinner last month." Another silence, longer this time. I could imagine her trying to process the information, trying to reconcile the daughter she thought she knew with this new reality. "Emma, are you sure this is legitimate? That seems like an extraordinary amount of money for..." Oh, she trailed off, clearly unsure how to finish the sentence without insulting me. For a painting by someone like me. For art created by their impractical daughter. For work they'd never taken seriously. "It's completely legitimate, Mom. Meridian Fine Arts is one of the most prestigious auction houses in the country. They don't deal with scams or unrealistic estimates." "But how is that possible? I mean, you just started showing your work professionally." "Just started. I'd been exhibiting for 3 years, building relationships with galleries and collectors, developing my technique and artistic voice. But in her mind, anything that hadn't resulted in immediate financial success didn't count as real professional activity." "I've been working toward this for years," I said gently. "The exhibition in Los Angeles was a breakthrough, but it built on everything I've been doing since I graduated college." "Of course, dear. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. It's just so unexpected." Unexpected, because they'd never believed it was possible, because their understanding of my capabilities was so limited that success on this scale seemed impossible. "Is Dad there? I'd like to share the news with him too." "He's watching the game, but I'm sure he'll want to hear about this." "Robert!" I heard her call. "Robert, come talk to Emma. She has some news about her art." I could hear him in the background, grumbling about being interrupted during the fourth quarter. The same man who'd dismissed my career as hobby projects. was being asked to pause his entertainment to hear about my professional breakthrough. "Emma?" His voice was gruff, distracted. "Your mother says you have news?" "Hi, Dad. My painting is being auctioned next week at a major auction house. The estimate is $200,000 to $300,000. The silence was even longer than my mother's had been. I could hear the television commentary about incomplete passes and defensive strategies, but nothing from my father. "Dad?" "That's quite a lot of money," he said finally, his tone carefully neutral. Quite a lot of money, the understatement of the century, delivered with the emotional investment of someone commenting on grocery prices. "Yes, it is. This could completely change my career trajectory." "Well, don't count your chickens before they hatch," he said, and I could hear him settling back into his chair. "Estimates aren't guarantees. The actual sale might be very different." Even now, even when faced with evidence that my career was succeeding beyond anyone's wildest projections, his first instinct was to lower expectations and prepare me for disappointment. Not excitement, not pride, not amazement at what I'd accomplished, but caution about counting on success before it was finalized. "You're right," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "But even if it sells for half the estimate, it would still be a career-changing amount." He replied, his attention already returning to the game. I hung up feeling deflated despite the incredible news I'd just shared. This should have been a moment of family celebration, a vindication for the path I'd chosen against their advice. Instead, it felt like another example of the emotional distance that had always existed between us. Mason called me an hour later. "I just talked to Mom," he said. "She told me about the auction estimate. Emma, that's insane." But she seemed kind of stunned by the whole thing. Stunned is one word for it. Dad's response was to warn me not to count my chickens before they hatch. "Are you kidding me? You just told them your painting might sell for $300,000 and he gave you the 'don't get your hopes up' speech?" "Pretty much." "Emma, you realize this proves everything you've been saying for years, right? This proves that your artistic judgment was correct and their practical advice was wrong." I appreciated Mason's indignation on my behalf, but I was beginning to understand that my family's reaction to my success would be complicated by their inability to admit they'd been wrong. Acknowledging the value of my achievement would require acknowledging that they'd misunderstood my potential for years. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe they'll find ways to minimize it or explain it away." "How do you minimize a $300,000 art sale?" "I guess we'll find out." The week leading up to the auction was a blur of interviews, catalog preparations, and nervous energy. Victoria arranged for me to speak with several art publications about my work and my experience as an emerging artist breaking into the contemporary market. The interviews were exciting but surreal, discussing my artistic vision and career trajectory as if I were already an established figure rather than someone who'd been worried about rent just months earlier. The night before the auction, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the painting itself, the hours I'd spent layering colors and textures, the specific moments of inspiration that had guided each decision. Desert Dreams had been a personal piece, created not for commercial purposes, but as an exploration of my own relationship with the landscape I'd grown up in. The idea that it would soon be evaluated by strangers willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars felt both thrilling and terrifying. Victoria called early the morning of the auction. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like I might throw up," I admitted. "That's completely normal. I've worked with artists whose pieces have sold for millions, and they all felt the same way. Before their first major auction. What if it doesn't sell? What if nobody bids?" "Emma, stop. I've seen the interest level. There are at least 6 serious bidders registered specifically for your piece. This isn't going to be a question of whether it sells, but how high the bidding will go." The auction was scheduled for 7 o'clock Pacific time, which meant 10 o'clock in Phoenix. I spent the day trying to distract myself with normal activities, but everything felt surreal. I cleaned my apartment, worked on a new painting, went for a walk in the desert preserve near my complex, but nothing could quiet the nervous energy building in my chest. At 9:30, I set up my laptop in my living room and navigated to the auction house's live streaming page. The interface showed the current lot being auctioned, the bidding activity, and a chat function where viewers could comment in real time. My painting was lot 47 out of 63. I watched as contemporary pieces by other artists sold for amounts that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. A sculpture by an artist I'd never heard of went for $120,000. A painting that looked like something I might have created in art school sold for $85,000. At 10:15, lot 47 appeared on the screen. Desert Dreams looked magnificent under the auction house lighting, the colors richer and more vibrant than I'd ever seen them. The auctioneer's voice was crisp and professional as he described the piece. Lot 47, Desert Dreams by Emma Rodriguez. Mixed media on canvas, 60 by 48 inches. This remarkable piece exemplifies the emerging contemporary Southwest movement, combining traditional landscape elements with urban industrial materials. The artist's technique demonstrates exceptional skill in layering and texture creation. The bidding opened at $50,000 and my heart stopped. Someone, somewhere, thought my work was worth $50,000 without hesitation. $50,000? Do I hear 75? A paddle went up immediately. 75. 1,000 now 100? Another paddle. 100,000. Do I hear 125? The bidding was happening so fast I could barely follow it. The chat function exploded with comments from viewers around the world, many of them expressing amazement at the rapid price increases. 150, now 175. 200,000? Do I hear 225? I was gripping my laptop so hard my fingers were white. $200,000, the low end of the estimate, and they were still bidding. 250? Now 275? 300,000. Do I hear 325? 300,000. The high end of the estimate, and there were still multiple bidders. Competing. 350, now 400? $400,000 for a painting I'd created in my studio apartment. I started crying, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that my life had just fundamentally changed. 450. Do I hear 500? The bidding continued to climb. 500,000, 600,000, 700,000. At 800,000, it slowed down with only 2 bidders remaining. 850? Do I hear 900? A pause. The auctioneer repeated the call. 900,000. Do I hear 950? Another pause, longer this time. 950. Do I hear 1 million? $1 million. I couldn't breathe. Someone raised their paddle. 1 million. Do I hear 1.1? 1.1 million? Do I hear 1.2? 1.2 million? Do I hear 1.3? The final bid came from a phone bidder, someone whose identity I would probably never know. $1.3 million. 1.3 million? Do I hear 1.4? 1.3 million going once, going twice. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the auction house and through my laptop speakers. Sold for $1.3 million. I sat in my living room, tears streaming down my face, staring at a screen that showed my painting with sold $2,300,000 displayed beneath it. In the chat function, hundreds of people were typing congratulations and expressing amazement at the sale price. My phone started ringing immediately. Victoria, my mother, Mason, numbers. I didn't recognize that were probably reporters or gallery representatives. I let them all go to voicemail for a moment, needing to process what had just happened in silence. $1.3 million. After the auction house commission and other fees, I would net just over $1 million from a single painting. Money that would eliminate every financial worry I'd ever had. Money that would let me focus entirely on creating art without concern for rent or groceries or whether I could afford new brushes. But more than the money, this was validation on a scale I'd never imagined possible. Somewhere in the world, someone had been willing to pay more than $1 million for something I'd created with my own hands and imagination. My work had been judged worthy of that investment by people who understood art as both cultural expression and financial asset. I finally answered my phone when Mason called for the third time. "Emma, holy shit! Did you see that? Did you see what just happened?" "I saw it," I said, my voice shaky with emotion. $1.3 million. Emma, you're a millionaire. You're a successful professional artist. You did it. The words sounded impossible even as he said them. 6 months ago, I'd been the family disappointment, the impractical dreamer who needed to get serious about life. Now I was a millionaire artist whose work was being collected by people who paid more for a single painting than most people made in a decade. "I can't believe it's real," I whispered. "It's real, Emma. You made it real. All those years of work, all those family dinners where they told you to be practical, all those nights when you probably wondered if you were crazy for believing in yourself. This proves you were right all along." After we hung up, I called Victoria, who was practically screaming with excitement. "Emma, that was incredible! The energy in the room was electric. I've never seen bidding that competitive for an emerging artist's work. This changes everything for your career." We talked for 20 minutes about what this meant for my future, opportunities, the galleries that would now be interested in representing me, the collectors who would want to see my new work. My entire professional landscape had shifted in the span of 10 minutes. But the call I was dreading was the one I knew I had to make. My parents needed to hear about the results directly from me, not from Mason or from news coverage. I needed to see how they would respond to concrete proof that their practical daughter had achieved something they'd considered impossible. I dialed their number, my hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline and emotion. "Emma?" My mother's voice was tight with anxiety. "We've been waiting to hear from you. How did the auction go?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, my painting just sold for $1.3 million. The silence was absolute. Not even the sound of television in the background this time. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm here." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Did you say $1.3 million?" "Yes, $1.3 million. "Robert?" I heard her call, her voice stronger now. "Robert, get in here right now. Emma's painting sold for over $1 million. I could hear him approaching, could imagine him setting down his drink or his newspaper with the resignation of someone being interrupted once again by his daughter's artistic endeavors. "What's this about $1 million?" His voice was skeptical, as if the amount was so large it couldn't possibly be real. "Dad, my painting just sold at auction for $1.3 million. After fees, I'll net just over $1 million. The silence stretched so long I began to wonder if the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice was different than I'd ever heard it before. "Emma, are you absolutely certain about this? This isn't some kind of mistake or misunderstanding?" "I watched it happen live, Dad. The auction was broadcast online. The sale is real." $1.3 million, he repeated slowly, as if testing the words to see if they made sense. "Yes." Another long pause. "Well," he said finally, and I could hear him struggling to find words adequate to the moment. "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order. Not pride, not amazement, not acknowledgement that he'd been wrong about my career prospects. Just a grudging admission that the occasion merited some form of recognition. "Thank you," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Emma, honey." My mother's voice was stronger now. This is just incredible. I don't think any of us imagined something like this was possible. Finally, an admission of truth. They hadn't imagined it was possible because they'd never really believed in my talent or my dedication. They'd seen my artistic pursuits as expensive hobbies rather than professional development, and success on this scale had been literally unimaginable to them. "I need to go," I said, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the evening. "I have a lot of calls to return and details to work out." "Of course, dear. We're so proud of you." Proud of me. Now that my success had been validated by an amount of money too large to dismiss or minimize, they were proud. Not when I'd spent years developing my skills, not when I'd gotten my first gallery showing, not when I'd chosen to pursue my passion despite their skepticism. Only now, when external validation had made my achievement undeniable. After I hung up, I sat in my living room looking around at the space that had been my world for the past 3 years. The paint-stained table, the canvases leaning against, walls, the makeshift easel I'd constructed from hardware store supplies. This was where I'd created the work that had just sold for more than $1 million. Tomorrow, everything would change. There would be interviews and opportunities and galleries competing for my attention. There would be financial advisors and investment options and decisions about how to use this windfall to build an even stronger career. But tonight, I just wanted to sit in the space where it all began, surrounded by the tools and materials that had made this moment possible, and appreciate the extraordinary distance I'd traveled from that disastrous Sunday dinner just a few months earlier. The girl they'd dismissed as an impractical dreamer had just become a millionaire artist. And somehow, that felt like the most practical achievement of all. The morning after the auction brought a reality I hadn't anticipated. Fame. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since 6 a.m. with calls from reporters, gallery owners, collectors, and artists I'd never met who somehow had my number. The art world, it turned out, was a surprisingly small community where news traveled at lightning speed. I'd finally turned the phone to silent and was making coffee when someone knocked on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in an expensive suit holding a large floral arrangement that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. "Emma Rodriguez? I'm Jennifer Walsh from Southwest Contemporary Magazine. We'd love to do a feature story about your incredible success." More flowers arrived throughout the morning, along with champagne, gift baskets, and business cards from people who'd never shown interest in my work before yesterday. The transformation was dizzying. 24 hours earlier, I'd been a struggling artist worried about next month's bills. Now, I was apparently worth cultivating. Victoria called around noon with a list of interview requests and exhibition opportunities that made my head spin. "Emma, this is how careers are made," she said. "The momentum from last night's sale is extraordinary, but we need to be strategic about how we handle it. The wrong move now could waste this opportunity." She'd arranged for a publicist, a financial advisor, and meetings with 3 different galleries that wanted to represent my work. The speed at which my life was changing felt overwhelming, but also intoxicating. For years, I'd fantasized about being taken seriously as an artist. Now, everyone wanted to take me seriously. "There's something else," Victoria continued. "The collector who bought Desert Dreams wants to meet you. He's flying to Phoenix next week specifically to discuss commissioning a series of larger works." A commission. From someone who'd just spent over $1 million on my art. The validation was almost too much to process. What kind of timeline are we talking about? He's thinking 12 to 18 months for completion, with a budget of $2 to $3 million for the entire series. $2 to $3 million for work I hadn't even created yet. The numbers were so large they felt abstract, like play money in a child's game, rather than actual compensation for my labor. "Victoria, I need to ask you something honestly. Is this normal? Do artists typically see this kind of response after a single successful auction?" She laughed, but not unkindly. Emma, nothing about your trajectory has been normal. Most artists spend decades building to their first six-figure sale. What happened last night was extraordinary, and the response reflects that. After we hung up, I tried to return to some semblance of routine. I set up my easel and attempted to work on a new piece, but concentration was impossible. Every few minutes, my phone would light up with another notification, another opportunity, another person who suddenly wanted to be part of my world. Around 3 o'clock, my doorbell rang again. This time, through the peephole, I saw my entire family standing in the hallway. Mom, Dad, Ashley, Tyler, and Mason, all dressed like they were attending a formal event rather than visiting my cramped apartment. I opened the door to find them arranged in a semicircle, looking at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Not the casual familiarity of family, but something closer to awe mixed with uncertainty. Emma? My mother said, stepping forward with a smile that seemed forced. Would it be okay if I posted some of these on social media? He asked. I mean, my sister is a famous artist now. People will want to see where the magic happens. Famous artist. The label felt foreign and slightly uncomfortable. I'd wanted recognition for my work, but the celebrity aspect of success was something I hadn't fully considered. Sure, I said, though the idea of my private creative space becoming social media content made me uneasy. My mother was examining the gift baskets and flower arrangements that had arrived throughout the day. Who sent all of these? She asked. Galleries, collectors, magazines, people I've never met who want to work with me now. Now, Mason repeated, emphasizing the word. Interesting timing. The observation cut through the celebratory atmosphere like a knife. Mason was the only one acknowledging the obvious fact that these same people had been uninterested in my work just days earlier. Success had made me visible to them, but it hadn't changed the fundamental quality of what I'd been creating all along. That's how the art world works, I said diplomatically. Success creates opportunities for more success. But it's worth noting, Mason continued, that Emma's been creating work at this level for years. The only thing that changed yesterday was other people's recognition of its value. I wanted to hug him for the observation. He was the only family member who seemed to understand that yesterday's auction had revealed existing worth rather than creating new worth. My father checked his watch, a gesture that usually signaled his readiness to leave family gatherings. Emma, we should probably let you get back to your work, he said. I'm sure you have a lot of business to take care of after yesterday's success. Business to take care of. Even my creative process was being reframed as business operations. Actually, I was hoping we could all go to dinner, my mother said, to celebrate properly. Somewhere nice, to mark this incredible achievement. The suggestion surprised me. Family dinners at restaurants were rare in our household, typically reserved for major occasions like graduations or milestone birthdays. Apparently, becoming a millionaire artist qualified as a major occasion. That sounds great, I said, though. Part of me wondered if their sudden enthusiasm for celebration was genuine excitement for my success or an attempt to associate themselves with my newfound status. Ashley immediately pulled out her phone to research upscale restaurants in the area. What about that new place in Scottsdale? The one that got reviewed in Phoenix magazine? Of course, she would suggest the most expensive option, the place that would announce to other diners that we were celebrating something significant. The same woman who dismissed my artistic career as impractical was now eager to dine at establishments that would properly reflect my new financial status. Anywhere is fine with me, I said. As they prepared to leave and reconvene for dinner, each family member approached me with a slightly different energy than they'd ever brought to our interactions before. There was a new deference in their manner, a carefulness that suggested they were recalibrating their understanding of who I was and what I was capable of. Tyler hugged me goodbye with unusual intensity. Emma, I have to say, I'm really impressed. What you've accomplished is extraordinary. Impressed. He was impressed by my success, but I couldn't remember him ever expressing genuine interest in my artistic development during the years when I needed encouragement rather than congratulations. Ashley's goodbye was equally telling. Emma, if you need any legal advice about contracts or business formation, please call me. Family discount, of course. Family discount on services she'd never offered when I couldn't afford to pay full price for legal assistance. Now that I was successful, enough to afford professional fees, she was eager to provide family rates. My parents' goodbye was awkward. A combination of pride they weren't sure how to express, and lingering confusion about how their impractical daughter had achieved something so far beyond their expectations. "We're very proud of you," my mother said, kissing my cheek. "This is just wonderful news for the family." Wonderful news for the family. As if my success was primarily valuable for how it reflected on them, rather than for what it meant to me personally. After they left, I sat in my studio surrounded by evidence of my newfound fame and fortune, feeling strangely empty. The validation I'd craved for years had finally arrived, but it came packaged with a family dynamic that felt more transactional than celebratory. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. "That was weird, right? Everyone acting like they always supported your art career?" I texted back, "Very weird. But I guess this is what success looks like in our family. You deserve better than conditional support," he replied. "Your art was valuable before yesterday's auction, and the people who matter should have recognized that." Mason's words crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. The enthusiastic family support I was receiving felt hollow, because it was based on external validation rather than genuine appreciation for my journey or my work. "We wanted to come congratulate you in person. This is just so incredible." They filed into my living room, and I watched them take in the space with new eyes. The paint-stained furniture and makeshift art supplies that had always seemed to embarrass them now appeared to fascinate them. Ashley was staring at the canvases propped against the walls like she was seeing them for the first time. "Is that where you painted the $1 million piece?" Tyler asked, pointing to my easel. "Yes, right there." He approached it reverently, as if proximity to the space might help him understand how something so valuable had been created in such humble surroundings. My father remained near the door, clearly uncomfortable in the cramped space but trying to project an air of paternal pride that felt completely unfamiliar. "Emma, your mother and I have been talking," he said. "We realize we may not have been as supportive of your artistic pursuits as we should have been. May not have been as supportive." The understatement was so massive it would have been funny if it weren't so revealing. Years of lectures about practical careers, dismissal of my work as hobby projects, and advice to find something more stable reduced to mild concern about their level of support. "We always believed in your talent," my mother added quickly. "We just worried about the financial stability of an artistic career. Always believed in my talent." Another revision of history. I could remember dozens of conversations where they'd suggested I was wasting my time, where they'd encouraged me to find more reliable work, where they'd treated my dedication to art as a phase I needed to grow out of. "I appreciate that," I said carefully, unsure how to navigate this sudden shift in family dynamics. Ashley was examining one of my recent paintings with intense concentration. "Emma, I have to ask, how did you know this would happen? How did you know your work would become valuable?" The question revealed everything about how she understood success. In Ashley's mind, achievement was the result of calculation and strategic planning. The idea that I'd pursued art because I loved it, because it felt essential to who I was, rather than because I'd predicted its financial potential, was apparently incomprehensible to her. "I didn't know," I said. "I hoped it might happen eventually, but I painted because I had to paint. The success is amazing, but it was never guaranteed." "But surely you had some sense that your work was exceptional," Tyler insisted. You must have known you had a shot at this level of success." They needed me to have known. They needed my artistic pursuits to have been based on rational calculation rather than passion and faith, because admitting that passion and faith could lead to extraordinary success would challenge everything they believed about how life worked. "I knew I was improving," I said. "I knew I was developing something unique. But most artists believe in their work without any guarantee of external validation." Mason was the only one who seemed comfortable in my space, sitting on my paint-splattered couch with the ease of someone who'd visited many times before. "What I want to know," he said, "is how it feels to have been right all along." The question hung in the air like a challenge. How did it feel to have been right about pursuing an impractical career while they'd all been wrong about the necessity of playing it safe? "It feels..." I paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound vindictive. "It feels like validation for a choice I made because it felt authentic, not because I knew it would lead here." My father cleared his throat, the sound he made when preparing to deliver important pronouncements. "Emma, given this new development in your career, your mother and I think it would be appropriate for you to consider moving out of this apartment, something more suited to your new status as a successful artist." My new status. As if the value of my work had fundamentally changed who I was, rather than simply revealing what had always been true. "I like my apartment," I said. "It's where I do my best work." "But surely you could work anywhere," Ashley said. "And now you can afford something much nicer, something more professional." Professional. The same word they'd used to dismiss my artistic setup for years was now being applied to encourage me to change it. My cramped studio had been evidence of my impracticality when my work was worthless. But now that my work was valuable, the same space was beneath my station. "The space isn't what makes the work valuable," I said. Van Gogh created masterpieces in poverty. Georgia O'Keeffe painted some of her most famous pieces in a tiny apartment. The location isn't what matters. Tyler looked skeptical. "But wouldn't a proper studio space help you work more efficiently, now that you can afford it?" They still didn't understand. They thought success meant upgrading everything about my life to match some external standard of what successful people were supposed to have. The idea that I might choose to maintain the conditions that had fostered my creativity was apparently inconceivable. "Maybe eventually," I said. "But right now, I'm focused on the work itself, not the trappings." My mother nodded as if this made perfect sense, though I could see the confusion in her eyes. "Of course, dear. You know what's best for your career." Your career. Now it was officially a career rather than a hobby. The $1 million sale had magically transformed my artistic pursuits from impractical dreaming into legitimate professional activity. "There's something else we wanted to discuss," my father said, settling into the formal tone he used for important business conversations. "Your mother and I think it would be wise for you to consider some professional financial advice. This windfall represents a significant opportunity for long-term wealth building." Windfall. As if the money had fallen from the sky rather than resulted from years of dedicated work and skill development. "I've already been connected with a financial advisor through the gallery," I said. "That's good," he replied, "but you might want to get a second opinion. Someone who specializes in sudden wealth management." Sudden wealth management. The phrase made me want to laugh. My wealth wasn't sudden. It was the delayed recognition of value I'd been creating for years. But in their minds, yesterday's auction had conjured money from thin air, rather than fairly compensating me for existing work. Ashley was scrolling through her phone, reading something that made her eyes widen. "Emma, there's already an article about you online. Phoenix artist's $1 million breakthrough stuns art world. They're calling you one of the most promising emerging artists in the Southwest." She showed me the screen, where my photo appeared alongside images of my paintings and quotes from gallery owners about my potential. Seeing myself described in terms typically reserved for established artists felt surreal. "This is incredible publicity for your career," Ashley continued, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "You should think about trademark protection for your name and maybe forming an LLC for your artistic business activities." Business activities. Even my creative expression was being reframed in corporate terms, reduced to something that could be optimized and protected and managed like any other commercial enterprise. "I'll look into it," I said, though the idea of turning my art into a formal business structure felt like a betrayal of everything that made it meaningful to me. Tyler was taking photos of my studio setup with his phone, apparently fascinated by the humble origins of million-dollar artwork. They were celebrating the auction results, not the years of dedication and growth that had made those results possible. The irony wasn't lost on me that achieving everything I'd dreamed of had somehow made my family relationships feel more complicated rather than more satisfying. Success had forced them to acknowledge my artistic career, but it hadn't changed their fundamental understanding of what made that career valuable. As I prepared for our celebration dinner, I found myself wondering if this was what all career breakthroughs felt like: triumphant and isolating in equal measure, proving you were right while highlighting how wrong everyone else had been about your potential. The woman who'd been dismissed as an impractical dreamer was now being courted by galleries and collectors around the country. But the family members who'd never believed in her work were now eager to claim credit for her success, rewriting history, to position themselves as supportive rather than skeptical. Tonight, we would toast my achievement at an expensive restaurant, surrounded by other successful people who would recognize my new status in the community. But underneath the celebration would be the uncomfortable truth that some victories feel lonely, especially when the people who should have believed in you all along only start believing after the world tells them they should. The girl who'd left her painting propped against her parents' dining room wall had become a millionaire artist. But the family who'd never understood the value of that painting were now struggling to understand the woman who'd created it, and their belated recognition felt more like an ending than a beginning. The celebration dinner at Meridian Restaurant in Scottsdale was everything I'd expected and nothing I'd hoped for. My family had chosen the most expensive establishment they could find, complete with white tablecloths, crystal stemware, and a sommelier who spoke about wine pairings with religious reverence. The entire production felt like performance art, a carefully staged demonstration of how successful families celebrated major achievements. I watched my parents study the menu with the intensity of scholars deciphering ancient texts, clearly overwhelmed by options that cost more than they typically spent on groceries in a week. Ashley photographed her appetizer from multiple angles before posting it to Instagram with the caption, "Celebrating my incredibly talented sister's $1 million art sale." Tyler ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the list, insisting that the occasion demanded proper recognition. The strange thing was how normal they were all trying to act, as if expensive dinners to celebrate my artistic achievements had been a regular occurrence throughout my life, rather than an unprecedented event triggered by external validation of my worth. "Emma, you simply must tell us about your creative process," my mother said, leaning forward with the earnest expression of someone conducting an important interview. "How do you decide what to paint?" The question would have been touching if she'd asked it 3 months ago, or 3 years ago, or at any point during the decade I'd been seriously developing my artistic voice. Now it felt like research, as if she were gathering information about a celebrity she'd been assigned to profile rather than expressing genuine curiosity about her daughter's passion. "It's intuitive," I said, cutting into the overpriced steak I hadn't wanted to order. "I respond to what I see and feel, and try to capture something that feels true about the experience of living in this landscape." "That's so artistic," Ashley said, her tone suggesting that being artistic was a quaint hobby she'd never quite understood. "I wish I had that kind of creative vision, but I'm just too practical. Just too practical. The same practicality she'd, used to dismiss my career choices for years, was now being presented as a personal limitation rather than superior judgment. She was rewriting our history in real time, transforming herself from the skeptical sister who'd questioned my choices into the admiring sibling who simply lacked my special gifts. "You could paint if you wanted to," I said. "It's a skill that develops with practice, not some mystical talent people are born with." "Oh, I could never create anything like your work," she insisted, and I realized that mythologizing my abilities served her purposes better than acknowledging that artistic skill was achievable through dedication. If my success was due to rare, innate talent, then her previous skepticism was understandable. If it was the result of hard work and persistence, then her discouragement had been actively harmful. Tyler raised his wine glass with the theatrical flourish of someone making an important toast. "To Emma, who proves that following your dreams can lead to extraordinary success." Following your dreams. The same dreams he'd advised me to abandon just months earlier were now being celebrated as admirable examples of personal conviction. The cognitive dissonance was staggering, but everyone at the table seemed committed to maintaining the fiction that they'd always supported my artistic ambitions. "To Emma," they chorused, raising their glasses in unison. I smiled and thanked them, but the words felt hollow. This wasn't a celebration of my journey or my growth as an artist. It was a celebration of my market value, a recognition of financial success rather than creative achievement. The difference might seem subtle to outside observers, but it felt enormous to me. My father cleared his throat, the signal that he was preparing to deliver one of his important speeches. "Emma, your success has got your mother and me thinking about our own relationship with art. We realize we may have been too focused on practical concerns and not appreciative enough of cultural achievements." Too focused on practical concerns. Another masterful reframing of years of active discouragement. They hadn't been wrong about the viability of artistic careers. They'd simply been overly concerned with financial security. "We're thinking about becoming art collectors ourselves," my mother added. "Maybe starting with some local artists, supporting the community that's been so good to you." Art collectors. The same people who'd given away my painting as casual home decor were now planning to enter the art market as sophisticated patrons. The transformation was so complete it felt like satire. "That's great," I said, because any other response would have created the kind of family conflict I no longer had the energy to navigate. Ashley leaned forward conspiratorially. "Emma, I have to ask about something. There are rumors that Hollywood celebrities are starting to collect your work." "Is that true?" "Rumors about celebrities." My sister, who dismissed my career as impractical fantasy, was now fishing for gossip about famous people who might be interested in my paintings. The shift from skeptic to starstruck family member was dizzying. "I don't know anything about celebrity collectors," I said truthfully. "My gallery handles those relationships." "But surely you must have some sense of who's buying your work," Tyler insisted. "At these prices, it's got to be people with serious money." Serious money. As if the value of my work was primarily interesting because of what it revealed about my collector's wealth rather than what it suggested about my artistic merit. The conversation continued in this vein throughout dinner, with each family member trying to position themselves as supportive participants in my artistic journey while carefully avoiding any acknowledgement of their previous skepticism. It was like watching skilled politicians rewrite their voting records in real time, erasing inconvenient positions without admitting they'd ever held them. Mason was the only one who seemed uncomfortable with the revisionist history being constructed around the table. He ate quietly, occasionally catching my eye with expressions that suggested he was as bewildered by the performance as I was. "You know what I keep thinking about?" he said during a brief lull in the conversation. "That Sunday dinner a few months ago when Emma brought us that painting." The table went quiet. Mason had just referenced the forbidden topic, the family gathering that had ended so badly and led to my decision to stop seeking their approval. "That was a misunderstanding," my mother said quickly. "We were just concerned about Emma's financial stability." "Were we, though?" Mason continued, ignoring the warning signals from around the table. "Because I remember some pretty harsh things being said about Emma's choices." Ashley set down her wine glass with more force than necessary. "Mason, that's in the past. We're here to celebrate Emma's success, not relitigate old conversations." "I think those old conversations are relevant," Mason replied calmly. "Emma achieved this success despite our skepticism, not because of our support. Maybe we should acknowledge that." The tension around the table was palpable. Mason was forcing a confrontation with reality that everyone else was desperately trying to avoid. His words hung in the air like an accusation, challenging the carefully constructed narrative of family solidarity. "We always believed in Emma's talent," my father said firmly. "We just wanted her to be realistic about the challenges of an artistic career." "Did we?" Mason asked. "Because I remember Dad calling Emma's paintings hobby projects and Ashley suggesting she was being naive about the art world." I watched my family's faces as Mason systematically dismantled their revisionist history. The discomfort was obvious, but so was their determination to maintain the fiction that they'd been supportive all along. Those were expressions of concern, not lack of faith, Ashley said, her lawyer voice in full effect. "There's a difference between skepticism and discouragement." "Is there?" I asked, speaking for the first time since Mason had raised the topic. Because from my perspective, it felt like discouragement. The admission created a moment of absolute silence. I'd finally acknowledged the elephant in the room, the fact that their previous behavior had been hurtful rather than helpful. Mother reached across the table and patted my hand. "Emma, if we made you feel unsupported, that was never our intention. We just wanted you to be happy and secure." "If we made you feel unsupported." Conditional language that avoided taking responsibility, while appearing to acknowledge harm. They hadn't made me feel unsupported. I had felt unsupported because of their actions. "I know your intentions were good," I said carefully. "But impact matters more than intention. And the impact was that I felt like my family didn't believe in me." Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Emma, we're sorry if our concerns came across as lack of support. We were just trying to protect you from disappointment." Protect me from disappointment by discouraging me from pursuing the path that had just led to extraordinary success. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. "The thing is," I continued, surprising myself with my willingness to continue this conversation, "success feels different when you achieve it without support than when you achieve it with support. This celebration feels hollow because it's based on results rather than belief in the journey." My father's face reddened slightly. "Emma, that's not fair. Family relationships are complicated, and we did the best we could with the information we had." "What information?" Mason asked pointedly. Emma was improving consistently, getting gallery shows, building relationships with collectors. The information suggested she was making progress. "Small galleries," Ashley interjected. "Local shows. Nothing that indicated this level of potential. Success." "So success is only legitimate if it reaches a certain financial threshold?" I asked. They weren't celebrating my artistic achievement. They were celebrating their association with something the world had declared valuable. 6 months after the auction, I received an unexpected phone call from my Aunt Patty. She'd been cold toward me since the incident with the painting, but her tone now was warm and friendly. "Emma, dear, I hope you're not still upset about that misunderstanding with your painting. I had no idea it was so important to your career." Important to my career. As if the painting's significance was related to its professional utility rather than its personal meaning to me as its creator. "I'm not upset, Aunt Patty. I understand it was a miscommunication." "Good." Because I have a proposition for you. My friend Janet is redoing her living room, and she'd love to commission a piece from you. Something in blues and greens to match her new color scheme. A commission to match someone's decor. The same woman who'd refused to return my painting, because it looked perfect in her living room, was now trying to facilitate my work being used as sophisticated home decoration by her friends. I appreciate the referral, I said diplomatically, but I'm not really taking on decorative commissions right now. My work tends to be more conceptual than ornamental. Oh. She sounded confused, as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. Well, surely you could make an exception for family friends. Janet said she'd be willing to pay quite well. Pay quite well. The assumption that enough money would make me willing to compromise my artistic vision for interior design purposes revealed how little she understood about my relationship with my work. It's not about the money, I explained. It's about maintaining the integrity of my artistic practice. Integrity? She repeated, clearly baffled. But Emma, it's just a painting. Just a painting. 2 years ago, I might have tried to explain why my work meant more to me than decorative objects. Now, I simply thanked her for thinking of me and ended the conversation. The incident reminded me why the auction success, while gratifying, hadn't resolved the fundamental disconnect between how I understood my work and how my family understood it. They could celebrate its financial value without ever grasping its artistic significance, and that gap couldn't be bridged by market validation alone. A year after the auction, I was featured on the cover of Southwest Art magazine with the headline, "Phoenix Rising, Emma Rodriguez's Meteoric Success Story." The article traced my journey from struggling local artist to nationally recognized talent, but it focused heavily on the dramatic auction sale and its aftermath. When the magazine hit newsstands, my phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from family members who seemed more excited about the cover story than they'd been about the actual artistic achievements it described. For them, media recognition was even more validating than financial success because it provided social proof they could share with friends and colleagues. But by then, I'd learned to find my validation elsewhere, in the letter from a collector, who wrote about how my work had moved her to tears. In the museum curator, who described my paintings as essential documents of contemporary Western experience. In the young artist who told me my success had inspired her to take her own work more seriously. These responses came from people who understood art as something more than commodity or status symbol, who appreciated the years of development and risk-taking that had led to my breakthrough. Their recognition felt different because it was based on engagement with my actual work, rather than fascination with my market success. The girl who'd been dismissed as an impractical dreamer had become exactly what she'd always hoped to be, a serious artist whose work contributed something meaningful to contemporary culture. The financial success was wonderful, but the artistic recognition was transformative. My family never fully understood the difference between these two types of validation, never grasped why critical acclaim meant more to me than auction prices. But I'd stopped needing them to understand. Success had taught me that the most important approval comes from people who share your values, not from people who love you, despite disagreeing with your choices. 2 years later, when my work was included in a major museum exhibition about contemporary Southwestern art, my parents attended the opening reception. They walked through the galleries with evident pride, clearly enjoying their status as parents of a featured artist. But I could see that they were still puzzled by the intellectual framework surrounding the exhibition, still more comfortable discussing my career in financial terms than artistic ones. "Emma, this is just wonderful," my mother said as we stood in front of one of my pieces. "You must be so proud to have your work in a real museum." A real museum, as if the galleries that had previously shown my work had been somehow less legitimate, as if institutional validation was the final stamp of authenticity my career had needed. "I am proud," I said. But I was also proud when my work was hanging in smaller galleries. The venue doesn't change the quality of the work itself. She nodded as if she understood, but I could tell the distinction was lost on her. In her mind, my career had followed a clear progression from amateur to professional to successful, with each level of external recognition marking a genuine improvement in my abilities. The truth was more complex. My technical skills had certainly improved over the years, but the passion and vision that drove my work had been consistent throughout my journey. The world's recognition of my talent had changed, but the talent itself had been there all along, waiting for the right moment and platform to be fully appreciated. Standing in that museum, surrounded by evidence of my artistic achievement, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. I'd achieved everything I'd dreamed of as a young artist, but the people whose approval I'd once craved most deeply could only appreciate my success in terms they understood: money, prestige, social status. Mason joined me in front of the painting, the only family member who seemed genuinely moved by seeing my work in this context. "It's incredible, Emma," he said quietly. "Not just that you made it here, but that you stayed true to yourself along the way. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for believing in me when it was hard to believe in myself." "You never needed anyone else's belief," he replied. "You just needed time to prove what was always true." As the reception continued around us, I realized that my journey had come full circle in ways I hadn't expected. The impractical dreamer who'd been dismissed at family dinners had become a respected artist whose work would outlast any of us. But more importantly, I'd learned to value my own judgment above external validation, to find satisfaction in the work itself rather than in others' recognition of its worth. The $1 million sale had changed my life, but it hadn't changed who I was. I was still the same person who painted because she had to paint, who found meaning in the process of creation rather than in its rewards. The difference was that I no longer needed anyone else to understand that drive or to validate my choice to follow it. Success had taught me that the most important victories are internal. The decision to trust your vision despite others' skepticism, the commitment to develop your abilities regardless of external encouragement, the courage to pursue authenticity even when it seems impractical. My family would never fully understand the artist I'd become, but they didn't need to. I'd found my tribe among people who shared my values, my dedication to craft, my belief that art matters for reasons that transcend market value. Their recognition felt different because it was based on shared understanding rather than begrudging. Acknowledgement. The girl who'd left her painting propped against her parents' dining room wall had become a woman who no longer needed to leave her work anywhere for others to discover. She created from a place of confidence and purpose, knowing that the right audience would find her when the time was right. And in the end, that transformation was worth more than any auction price, more meaningful than any family celebration, more lasting than any external validation. It was the kind of success that couldn't be measured in dollars or recognition, but only in the quiet satisfaction of becoming exactly who you'd always meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. My growth as an artist only matters if it produces $1 million sales? The question cut to the heart of our fundamental disagreement about the value of artistic pursuit. In my family's worldview, activities were justified by their financial returns rather than their personal or cultural significance. My art had been worthless until the market declared it valuable. "That's not what we mean," my mother said quickly. "We always appreciated your artistic abilities." "Appreciated them as what?" I pressed. "As nice hobbies, as pleasant decorations, or as serious professional development?" The silence that followed answered my question more clearly than any words could have. Tyler attempted to redirect the conversation. "Emma, I think we're getting too focused on the past. What matters now is that you've proven yourself, and we're all incredibly proud of your achievement." Proven myself. As if my worth as an artist had been in question until external validation settled the matter. As if the years I'd spent developing my skills and vision had been some kind of test I needed to pass rather than valuable work in its own right. "I appreciate that you're proud of me now," I said. "But I needed you to believe in me before I proved myself." That's what family support means. Faith in someone's potential, not celebration of their confirmed success. Mason nodded emphatically. Exactly. Anyone can support a winner. The valuable support comes when someone's still struggling to break through. Ashley's frustration was becoming visible. "Emma, this is unfair. We're not mind readers. We couldn't have predicted that your art would suddenly become so valuable." "I wasn't asking you to predict the future," I replied. "I was asking you to respect my choice to pursue something I was passionate about, regardless of its financial prospects." "Even if it meant struggling financially for years?" my father asked. "Yes, even then." The admission hung in the air like a challenge to everything my family believed about responsible adult behavior. They couldn't conceive of a life philosophy that prioritized personal fulfillment over financial security, and my willingness to embrace that philosophy remained incomprehensible to them even after it had led to extraordinary success. "Well," my mother said with forced brightness, "what matters is that everything worked out beautifully. Emma's successful, and we're all here to celebrate together." Her determination to end the uncomfortable conversation was palpable, but I wasn't ready to let the moment pass without saying what needed to be said. "Mom, I love you all, and I appreciate that you're celebrating with me tonight. But I need you to understand that success doesn't retroactively justify the path I chose. My decision to pursue art was valid regardless of how it turned out financially." "Of course it was, dear," she replied, though I could tell she didn't really understand what I was trying to communicate. The dinner continued for another hour, with conversation carefully steered towards safer topics, like my upcoming exhibition opportunities and the positive media coverage my auction success had generated. But the earlier exchange had fundamentally changed the dynamic at the table. The pretense of unconditional family support had been exposed, and everyone was struggling to navigate the aftermath. When we finally left the restaurant, the goodbye hugs felt different than they had in years. Not warmer, exactly, but more honest. We all understood now that our relationships had been built on unspoken conditions, and my success had forced those conditions into the open. Mason walked me to my car while the others said their goodbyes in the restaurant parking lot. "That was intense," he said. "But I'm glad you finally said what needed to be said." "Was I too harsh?" I asked. "Not even close. They needed to hear it, and you needed to say it. This whole revisionist history thing was getting ridiculous." I hugged him tightly, grateful for his honesty and support throughout this entire journey. "Thank you for backing me up in there. Thank you for not giving up on your dreams when everyone else told you to be practical. You proved that sometimes the impractical choice is actually the most practical choice of all." As I drove home, through the Phoenix night, I reflected on how different this evening had felt from the family dinners of my childhood. The external trappings had been elegant and expensive, but the underlying dynamic remained fundamentally unchanged. My family still viewed success through a purely financial lens, still struggled to understand the value of pursuing passion without guaranteed returns. The difference was that I no longer needed their understanding to validate my choices. The $1 million sale had given me financial security, but more importantly, it had given me the confidence to stop seeking approval from people who would only recognize my worth after the world had declared it for them. Over the following weeks, my life transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. Gallery representation, museum interest, commission requests that would keep me busy for years. But the most significant change was internal. I finally understood that external validation, no matter how spectacular, couldn't retroactively heal the wounds created by years of feeling unsupported. My family's newfound enthusiasm for my career felt like too little, too late. Not because I was bitter or vindictive, but because I'd learned to find validation from sources that understood the value of artistic pursuit, regardless of its market, performance, The community of artists, collectors, and critics who now surrounded me appreciated my work for reasons that went beyond its sale price. 3 months after the auction, I moved into a proper studio space in downtown Phoenix. Not because my family thought I should upgrade, but because my practice had evolved to require more room for larger pieces. The decision was mine alone, based on my needs as an artist, rather than anyone else's expectations about how successful people should live. My parents visited the new studio once, walking through the space with the careful reverence of tourists in a museum. They admired my work-in-progress pieces and nodded appreciatively at my professional setup, but I could see that they still didn't really understand what they were looking at. To them, these were expensive objects rather than expressions of artistic vision. "This is wonderful, Emma," my mother said, examining a canvas I'd been working on for weeks. "It's so much more sophisticated than your earlier work." More sophisticated, as if sophistication was the goal rather than authenticity, as if my artistic development could be measured by how closely my work resembled what successful art was supposed to look like. "It's different," I agreed. "But I'm not sure sophistication is the right word. It's more resolved, maybe. More confident." "Well, whatever you call it, it's certainly impressive. I'm sure it will sell for a lot of money." There it was again. The reduction of artistic merit to market value. Even surrounded by evidence of my creative growth, my mother's primary framework for understanding my work remained financial. That evening, I had dinner with Victoria and several other artists, who'd become genuine friends over the past few months. We talked about technique and inspiration, about the challenges of maintaining creative integrity while building sustainable careers, about the strange experience of watching the art world discover work we'd been creating for years. "The weird thing about success," said Maria, a sculptor whose work had recently been acquired by a major museum, "is how it changes everyone else's perception of who you've always been." "Right?" I replied. "My family acts like I became an artist the day my painting sold for over $1 million. Like everything before, that was just practice for my real career. They can't conceive of artistic work as valuable unless the market confirms it," added James, whose photographs had just been featured in a major retrospective. "It's like they need external permission to take creativity seriously." The conversation crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. My family's belated support wasn't really about me or my work. It was about their need to align themselves with recognized success.